Welcome to part 16 of my reading of my translation of Ynglinga Saga and commentary. Today I'm going to be reading about the death of King Granmarr and King Hjörvard, as well as the death of King Ingjald. I will be reading about King Ivar Wide-fathom and maybe also King Olaf Tree-feller. We're getting close to historical times now and the sagas of the kings proper, so more specific things and more geography and more to actually talk about, which is good. And I'd like to remind you there'll be a banner link on the video right about now about where you can have a closer look on the genealogy. I'm making, as I translate, I make a complete genealogy of all the names in Ynglinga Saga, so it's really easy to see the relations, because it can be quite confusing with all the different kings and all the different small petty kingdoms and so forth, and especially the family relations. So it's a good resource and it's free. Anyway, let's get going. The death of King Granmarr and King Hjörvard. The autumn after King Granmarr and King Hjörvard, his Måg, went to visit one of their farms on an island called Sili. Again, Måg, if you see my previous video, I have quite a long explanation of that. Basically, it means in-law, except when you have blood relations that go beyond fifth cousin, that which are blood relations are called frende, beyond fifth cousin. They also kind of fall into the category of Måg or Mågskap, in-law relations. I'm just not translating it because it's used so much and it's a precise word. So Måg. Sili, this is King Høgne and Hilde, his son, rode up into Sweden and killed the men that King Ingjald had set to rule. And when they stayed there as guests, King Ingjald came one night with his army, surrounded the house and burned it down with everyone inside. After that he claimed all the lands they held as kings under his own kingdoms, and set chieftains to rule over them. King Høgne and Hilde, his son. King Høgne is King Granmarr, who was just burnt to death. This is his father-in-law. And Hilde is King Høgne's son. So they would be Mågs of King Granmarr. King Høgne and Hilde, his son, rode up into Sweden and killed the men that King Ingjald had set to rule over the lands that had belonged to King Granmarr, their Måg. There was much strife between King Ingjald and King Høgne for a long time, but King Høgne held on to his lands until the day of his death. King Ingjald had 2 children with his wife, and the eldest was called Åsa, and the other Olaf Tree-feller. And Gautild, King Ingjald's wife, sent the boy to Bove, his foster father, in West Gautland. He was raised there with Saxe, the son of Bove, who was called Flette. People say that King Ingjald killed 12 kings and betrayed all those he promised peace. He was called Ingjald Ill-ruler. He was king over most of Svekjol. He gave his daughter Åsa to marry King Gudre of Skåne. She took after her father's temperament. Skåne was a southern kingdom It's still called Skåne. It's a big region in South Sweden. Åsa was to blame for Gudrud killing Halfdan, his brother. Halfdan was the father of Ivar Wide-fathom. Åsa was also the reason for King Gudrud's bane, her own husband. The death of Ingjald Ill-ruler. Ivar Wide-fathom came to Skåne after his father-brother Gudrud fell. And again, it sounds a little clumsy in English, father-brother. It's just that these terms are much more precise than just using uncle, which could be father-brother, father-sister, or mother-brother, or so forth. So in Sweden today, they still use these terms. In Denmark, some of them. And it's much more precise. And so I'm just translating it quite literally with the original Norse. Ivar Wide-fathom came to Skåne after his father-brother Gudrud fell, and he gathered a great army there, and they went up towards Svitjod. Åsa Ill-ruler had already left to find her father, and now they're giving her the same derogatory name as Ingjald because of all her bad actions. King Ingjald was guesting a farm called Rening, and this is Rening is also in Södermanland. It's on an island west of Sälön, and there's a farm there. King Ingjald was guesting a farm called Rening when he heard that King Ivar was close by. Ingjald reckoned that he didn't have the force to compete with Ivar, but he thought it was also quite clear that if he set out to flee, his enemies would come streaming in from all sides. He and Åsa then made a decision that has become infamous. They had everyone get blind drunk and set fire to the hall. They burned the hall down with all the people inside, including King Ingjald and Åsa. So says Tjodolf. And Ingjald, alive he walked into the smoke razor at Rening. While the house thief burned his souls, the kin of gods stepped through. And that fate, all peoples with the Swedes thought, was seldom seen, as he himself his own life freely first would give away. So the poem gives a slight redemption to King Ingjald. I don't know. But anyway, there are a few kennings here that are nice to know. Smoke razor maybe says itself. It is kenning for fire. The same house thief, hustjuv. This is also fire. Kin of gods. He's Ynglinga kin, so he's related to Odin. And so again, the poem is placing the Ynglinga king within the Ynglinga lineage, the royal lineage. On Ivar Wide-fathom. Ivar Wide-fathom conquered all of Sweden. He also conquered the kingdoms of the Danes and a large portion of Saxland and all of the eastern kingdoms and a fifth part of England. Of his line has since emerged Dane kings and Swede kings who were monarchs over those lands. After Ingjald Ill-ruler, the Uppsala rule was lost for the Ynglinga kin, if you count it in direct lineage. So Ivar Wide-fathom. Some researchers, not many, a few have maybe said that this was Ivar Beinløs, which most people reject. I also think it's quite a stretch. Ivar Beinløs was later in time, and Ivar Beinløs was one of the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok. And but it says here that he had a large portion of Saxland the eastern kingdoms, and a fifth of England. We know that Ivar Wide-fathom and his house, they had a lot of alliances down in Frisia and Saxland. So this isn't unlikely that they would be petty kings under his united kingdom. And he's called a monarch here. And then in the Norse is Einvald. He's ruling in Norwegian and Danish. You also see Enevold or Einevold. And it's means like a king of kings. So he rules. He's the supreme ruler, but he can have petty kings, earls, and such under him. So they had a lot of alliances down that way. And it also says he ruled the eastern kingdoms, which here would be the areas around Novgorod, maybe going into, and the Baltic countries, going south into the eastern parts of Poland. But especially around Novgorod. It's a little early for the Novgorod area, according to most sources. But that's how we interpret it. We only have written sources that are precise from around the 800s. But we know from traditions that this was always a passageway for when they went in Viking east. It was always this way. So I don't think it's unlikely that there would have been small kingdoms going east that were either ruled by princes from, for example, Ivar Wide-fathom's house, or paid tax to them. A fifth of England. This is usually is meant Northumbria, and I've been all around the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle looking for similar names to this Ivar in that time period, which would be the mid 600s, going towards the late 600s or early 600s. There's this window, but there's nothing there. Though if you go further south, the houses at that time were heavily involved in Geatish houses. And Ivar Wide-fathom is from this area. He's from the Geatish areas, Västgötland, these areas. So the fifth of England is usually for Northumbria, but maybe it's an imprecise pointing to alliances in the Anglo-Saxon areas. And one has to remember that the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms are only about 150, 200 years old at this time. And the poems we have, like Beowulf and such, from that time, they talk about Geatish and Danish royal houses. So it's not it's not completely off the wall. I think it's quite likely that there were connections, and that maybe for a period Ivar Wide-fathom held sway over a relatively large area. All the Vendel area finds are super rich. Vendel era, like this, they're very, very rich finds. So it's quite clear to me that they were quite a powerful royal houses in that area. I think we'll finish with the chapter on Olaf Tree-feller. And it's not Tree-feller like in tree fellow, but it's Tree-feller like in he chopped down a lot of trees. On Olaf Tree-feller. When Olaf, King Ingjald's son, heard of his father's fall, he left with the people that would follow him, the reason being that all the men of the Sviar rose up with a mind to kick out the kin of King Ingjald and all his friends. And I forgot to mention that this is the point mentioned in the last chapter where the Ynglinga line is kicked out of Sweden, basically. And you don't see the direct descendants there again. Not holding sway like this. And Olaf, he's the first to emigrate out of the Swedish areas. The reason being that all the men of the Sviar rose up with a mind to kick out the kin of King Ingjald and all his friends. Olaf first traveled up to Närike, but when the Sviar heard about his whereabouts, he wasn't allowed to stay there. He then traveled west through the forests, reaching a river that runs out in Vänern to the north and is called Elv. This is Göta Elv, which runs out in Göteborg, Gothenburg. They stopped there, they cleared the forest and burnt it down, and after that they started building. And I think they would probably have been building here, not on the east side, but on the west side, into the forests on the west side. Large towns grew up quickly, and they called them Värmland. Today is called Värmland. The soil was good there. When the people of Svesjöl heard about Olaf, that he was clearing forests, they called him Tree-feller and thought his actions were shameful. Olaf was married to a woman called Solveig or Sölva, the daughter of Halfdan Goldentooth, west in Solør. Solør is further west in Norway. Halfdan was the son of Solve Solveson, who again was the son of Solve the Old, who first cleared Solør. Olaf Tree-feller's mother was Gauthild, and her mother was Olaf, the daughter of Olaf Sharp-eye, king of Närike. Olaf and Sölva had two sons, Ingjald and Halfdan. Halfdan was raised in Solør with Sölva, with Solve, his mother brother. He was called Halfdan Whiteleg. Yeah, I think that's it. Now we see it's the Ynglinga kin are spreading west and establishing themselves further west. Next time I'm going to be reading more about Olaf Tree-feller, Halfdan Whiteleg, and Ingjald, Halfdan Whiteleg's brother. Anyway, thanks for this time. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe, and remember the genealogy that you can download. It's also in a link in the description below. And yeah, see you for the next video.